part of what we've heard a little bit in the conversations in the last couple of days have been some focus on what some of the challenges can be in developing an artistic practice in regions. I'd like to flip the coin and ask specifically, what are some of the advantages, or what are some of the things that distinguish or make it very ideal to be doing work? And let's not focus on the artistic practice so much as on the resourcing that artistic practice. Could we hear a little bit maybe from you, Ken?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, the sourdough thing was really the one thing that really drove our, success in different things. But it was also just through the ongoing relationships, and it's a lot easier, I think, in a regional area to actually have an ongoing relationship because you actually run into your donors while you're doing the supermarket shopping.
Yeah, we were talking about this. Yeah,
you actually run into them at opening night events, and you run into them, and you're actually having this ongoing conversation about what you're working on, how they're traveling, and you're actually involving them as well. And then you're also getting them along to meet the people that you're actually benefiting as well. I know with the deadlock attachments, the 9 young people, we actually set up an event where they actually got to meet the donors that actually supported them and the people who actually supported them. And it was just such a beautiful thing to actually see them come together. And it was great also because it was the soft cast and crew screening of Deadlock. So not only were the donors able to actually meet the people that they had actually supported, they were actually able to see, or be one of the first to see the actual end product that was going to be launched on the ABC iView the next day. So I think, you can actually do those more intimate relationships. And I think my model of fundraising is probably very different to a lot that you would actually come across. But that is, I think it's connected to the culture of who we are and the culture of our community as well. It's that kind of a very connected community, connected to their surroundings. It's a very creative community. There's a lot of very passionate believers in there, and a lot of people who retire there because they just love it. And so, apart from living in the best part of the world, it's also just a beautiful area as well. Yeah. And that's that connection. So you actually draw on that at the same time. You draw on anything that you can leverage. Yeah. Well, seriously.
As I think that's helpful. As I hear what you mentioned a moment ago, Sheena, there's a little bit of an interesting contradistinction. We often hear in metropolitan areas, especially where there are many organizations making demands on a core group of key philanthropists, we hear the term donor fatigue every now and then. But what I hear you describing is creating an opportunity. That fatigue is the last word associated with it, right? It's something new to be invested in and associated with.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely way of putting it, because I really, as a team, we gathered together people who weren't overwhelmed by the size of the ambition. And we didn't have any experience as individuals doing this, but we had a collective belief in the power of art and art making to transform lives and make lives meaningful. And my parents, as I said, were full-time musicians. My dad's still alive, and they were top of their field in Australia. And I just thought it was obvious that you needed that in your life. But they had to work day and night because, until my father got a job at the university, they weren't salaried. So they were excellent. But how come all my other friends at school's parents got paid a lot more? Just seemed wrong to me. So I do believe that you have to gather people around you who see this as a social movement, not just as fundraising. I mean, I often don't mention money for a long time when I talk to people, but I know they want to belong to an ambition bigger than themselves. We all do, don't we? We all want to believe in something that you can contribute to something beyond yourself. And I think that issue of culture, you mentioned the word culture, I think we're all involved in developing a new way of life in Australia. I mean, I didn't really just go to people who were local. We went to the Opera House and said, we can't afford equipment to put on a bigger size festival. We need help. And you need to be involved in the regions in Australia. So we reversed it and said, let's do it differently. Because in our little place, we didn't have anything in our way. It's sort of the answer to your question. So I actually think it was easier. I mean, Louise Heron came down and, you know, she's the CEO of the Opera House a few years ago, but it was Richard Evans I first went to. And Louise Heron stood up at the break and she said, well, I'm going to give. What's wrong with the rest of you in this audience? You know, so people want to belong to something where there's passion and a belief, and it's not just mainstream and more city stuff.
You mentioned the term social impact. I think it's a great thing for us to lead to next. I'd love it if, in a few words, each of you could describe some of the most effective ways social impact has been characterized successfully as resourcing has been gathered for an organization.
So, it's a bit of a buzzword, I feel, social impact, I guess for me, the most helpful way I found to think about it without getting overwhelmed is first time someone says social impact is to be clear what impact it is that you want to have. So you need to be able to understand, well, am I having social impact? Well, what is the impact I want to have? Because everything has an impact. It's just the ones that you want to define yourself or your organisation by. So if you can, where I've seen organisations use social impact to support the telling of their story and supporting the conversations that they're having with people, and to make it, give depth and meaning to what they do, is where they know why they exist and what impact they want to have, and then they measure that. And they find a way to measure that. And there's when I say measure as well, it's not, I get deeply uncomfortable when people want to attribute economic figure or financial figures to artistic or cultural outcomes, and so I'm certainly not here to tell people that they need to measure this in financial dollars, or it's just about numbers on a page. We ran 6 programs that had 300 people. It's you need some quantitative data, but it's actually the qualitative data that's the most powerful. So it's the stories of the people that you are engaging with, or the stories of the people whose life you are changing, or your community. And that's even borne out by the stories that you've told and about what's changed for the people and the communities that you've worked in. So for me, it's without offering a single example, it's it's knowing what impact you want to have, picking 2 or 3 things that you want to make sure that you measure in that, and then finding ways to tell that, whether it's through numbers or through stories. And often, 1 or 2 really great stories are what you can do to support the telling of the impact that you're having. Is that too esoteric? It's maybe one of you guys could support that with a specific example.
Okay. I can. So we ran a program called Creatability. It's short films about artists with disability that was initially started as a pilot project that a few years ago now that had New South Wales government funding, ABC North Coast initial funding, and it was like $25,000 to do 3 short films. And so we did that pilot project. And then after the first year, we were introduced to a anonymous donor. I love calling it anonymous, but they just were not interested in being acknowledged at all. They just wanted to be supported. And so they then actually said, well, we love what you've done with that pilot project. If you can get the same amount of money, then we'll match it. And due to other circumstances, we were able to get another lot of money. So that project tripled in size in the second year. And then in the third year, they still loved what we were doing, and so they gave us the same amount again to actually continue it into the third year. And by that stage, ABC, the national broadcaster, was actually on it, so it was no longer just the local regions ABC. The ABC Arts was actually involved. By that stage, we were hitting a total of 20 short films. And so that's that kind of constantly continuing that conversation and understanding what was in it for them, that we said, well, this is what we could actually, work together on to actually do. We have finished Creatability, and the Creatability has now been turned into a great internship at Create New South Wales. But the same donor that is actually attached to that, we then started discussing what we really wanted to do, which was an international residency scholarship program. And we explained to them that we actually wanted to send someone from regional Australia over to LA and put them into Rayleigh Studios, which is where Netflix is, and introduce them to executives and everything else. So it's a professional kind of main big project. And it happened so quickly. We set up the partnership, and within a week I had a meeting with them, and they actually then committed to actually supporting, fully funding through a philanthropic fund to actually do that for the first year. And so we are actually opening applications for that on Monday. So no short feet. But it is one of those things where now we have this international opportunity for regional areas. And so that is just part of that continuation of the journey, and actually that social impact that they wanted to have of how can we create change from this opportunity of actually supporting the arts? How can we actually change the lives of someone that we are passionate about also? And that is for us where we work together. We see what they want to achieve, see where we want to achieve, and we find this kind of beautiful synergy.
I'm recognizing that we're at the end of our time, and thank you for being such an incredibly participative audience. A thank you to our fantastic panel for your insights. It's great. It's great. And a thank you, she's not here, but to Elizabeth Rogers and to the team at Regional Arts New South Wales for putting this together, which is fantastic. I'll note we begin our programs with an acknowledgement of country that talks about the custodianship, right? The custodianship of community and the attachment to place and people to community. And a big piece of what we've been talking about here is what it means to reflect back to our audiences and to our supporters their custodianship of the organizations that may be led and or your artistic practice by you. And I think that's an important piece for us to close by reflecting on, right? The pride, the ownership, the connection to what it is that our arts organizations provide is an enormous piece of what it is that is the font of giving, whether that is volunteer work, whether that is financial resourcing. So if we could think about custodianship being a big piece of what we're watering the gardens of on a daily basis for the long game that is fundraising, I think we're all going to be the richer for it. And with that, thank you very much.